All right, welcome back to another episode of Net Chasers. Today we have Brenden Hill, who's at San Diego State University, and he leads the Aztec NIL initiative and all the strategies. So Brenden, thank you for being on this episode. Would really like to just kick it off with maybe tell our listeners and watchers a 30-second, 40-second career path, what got you there, but more importantly, what is the current state of college athletics from your lens?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me, and excited to have this conversation today around college athletics and all the craziness that's going on. But in terms of my background and career, I'm a former student athlete. I played for a Hall of Fame football coach at Virginia Tech named Frank Beamer a long time ago. Had the good fortune of winning some championships and having some teammates at the time who were good enough to play professionally. And I kind of started my career. I didn't go pro, but I started working with some of my former teammates on their marketing, PR, branding, all their appearances, that type of stuff right out of college. As soon as I got done, they got done. And I was able to kind of cut my teeth that way, and then spend some time after that in professional sports with the Washington Wizards. I spent 3 seasons with them as in-arena talent and working on the game production side. And then long story short, COVID, as everybody knows, happened. Went back, got my master's in sports leadership, and realized I wanted to get back into college athletics. I had an itch to coach, and even though my role currently is administrative, I still get to interface with our student athletes all the time, and it really brings me a lot of joy and pleasure. But that's kind of the quick and fast how I got to San Diego State. I took over our NIL program a couple years ago, and recently have also taken on our life skills program. And you kind of asked about the current state of college athletics. Those life skills, financial literacy, mental health, all those types of things are very important as we start to transition into this professionalized era where student athletes are earning 6 figures and more, or earning any type of money. It's important that we're just developing and cultivating the holistic person. So really take a lot of pride in the work we do here at San Diego State and the work that I get to do every day. And I'm really fortunate to be here.
Well, I loved watching, what you've been doing. And I know you collaborate with a lot of the local universities, but specifically for SDSU, what's your Northern Star as it relates to NIL, the resources that you're giving your student athletes? You talked about life skills. So where does it come from? But what is your personal initiative on, making it happen for those student athletes?
Yeah, I think it really, me being a former student athlete, I can relate to being in their shoes and being in that 18 to 22 range and kind of trying to figure it out. And I couldn't imagine, I wasn't in the era. Facebook had just started, not to age myself, when I was in college, but I couldn't imagine having all the social pressure through the different types of media outlets and things now where fans and people can access you. So I think our North Star is really just the student athlete experience, making sure student athletes who decide to spend their time at San Diego State, whether they're earning 6 figures or they're just on scholarship or they're a walk-on, leave here and feel like, oh my gosh, that was a great experience. And if NIL and our life skills program can be a small piece of that, I think it makes it all worth it. So that's really my North Star, is just making sure that the outcomes, very outcome focused, but being outcome focused, still focused on the processes that lead to those outcomes, right? Like not just trying to skip the process at all, but just understanding that, it's almost like being an athlete. You play to win the game, right? So our victories are seeing those students graduate and matriculate and transition out of higher ed into their lives, into fathers, wives, husbands, etc. CEOs, employees, teachers, doctors, whatever it may be, and they feel confident that they're prepared and they're ready. So.
And NIL has taken its own shape, from the early days of NIL and what student athletes were able to do. Where are we with the current state of NIL? What all of these laws and policies and rules, and regulations and whatnot. Like where are we? Is it sustainable as it relates to your lens? But also, I'm going to piggyback that question with, SDSU is huge, right? The athletic department's huge, and so the resources that are helping to fund this initiative and these life skill resources, where does that even come from as it relates to the future?
Yeah, well, I think fortunately, a lot of people, I feel like have made a verbal commitment. At least our department and our administration has made the commitment that things aren't going to change in terms of regress, right? Like we're not going to go backwards. If anything, we're only going to go forward, and we're only going to continue to invest. And I think our transition into the Pac-12 will hopefully increase our opportunity to only add resources for our student athletes from that respect. But in terms of sustainability and kind of where we are now, I really just feel like there's a lot of chefs in the kitchen. There's, whether it's the politicians in DC, whether it's the commissioners, whether it's the presidents, whether it's the athletic directors and the coaches and the committees and the NCAA and so forth and so on. They're just, and in college athletics, it's just so many chefs in the kitchen. And I kind of compare it to if the NBA, WNBA, USTA, the NFL all decided they wanted to be one league, how chaotic would that be, right? Like you'd have way too many chefs in the kitchen. And I think that's kind of the predicament we're in. We have a lot of opinions and a lot of things that are driving individual university and individual leadership's self-interest and what's, how can they benefit and how can they take care of their constituents, which I don't blame anyone for. But when you zoom out and realize, like, if you ask that question to leadership of what is the North Star for higher ed and college athletics, right? It should be about the student athlete experience. It should be about making sure that they are taken care of, because the students are the foundation for everything that we do. And I think for some reason or another, that kind of pyramid or paradigm has been flipped on its head a little bit, and the adults have kind of been more important or have made more money, definitely, than the student athletes, and have benefited more from the student athletes. So I think it's sustainable in terms of it's not going anywhere, in my opinion. But I definitely think we need more uniform policy, more standardized, rules and approaches to this thing. And I would love to see us get to that place, but I also know people are human, and anytime there's a competitive advantage to be gained, unfortunately, people are going to try and exploit those competitive advantages. So that's kind of the landscape we're in, and our approach is, and my role is really just to help us navigate that stuff, stay informed on what's going on, and kind of try and help our coaches and administration look around corners as best we can to anticipate instead of being reactionary. So
so there's so much to unpack there, but let me pull back to what you said earlier in that answer. What do you think that, you brought up a huge, it was a thought where, the professional sports model is every sport stands on their own.
Yeah.
Do you think that should college athletics go to that route where, the tennises and the footballs, the basketballs, should there be one
entity?
Yeah, just to keep them in their lane, but also, create the advancement that they need.
Yeah, I think you can look at it almost like the Olympic model, right? Like the Olympics have a lot of sports under their jurisdiction, but then there's also the NFL that operates independent of the Olympics and different things like that. But I think that would be bare minimum. I think what would have solved a lot of this and solve a lot of this is if we extract football out of the equation. I think, Chip Kelly, before he left UCLA, made a great comment that, the football program should, separate them, let them play a national schedule. And that's still not ideal, right? You see Penn State going all the way across the country to play UCLA, and potentially having travel be an impact on that. But I think all the other sports shouldn't necessarily have to play a national schedule like that. I think that's, once again, an impediment to the student athlete experience. If, students need to go to class, you've heard scenarios where students are in all online classes. They aren't even going to class in person anymore. I think those are all things that we're doing a disservice to the students and their experience. If scholastics and education are what we in development of the whole person is what we say we want to do, I think we're a little out of alignment there. So I definitely think there could be a world, or where you extract football as its own entity, so to speak, and then you keep everybody else kind of geographically associated, and allow these students to not have to miss a ton of class because they're traveling, into 2 different time zones, to compete. So yeah, it's complicated. I don't think there's no magic bullet, but I think part of the issue, once again, back to that leadership scenario and the chefs in the kitchen, and we just kind of need some good leadership to stabilize this thing.
Yeah. You also mentioned the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 is coming. So have you seen anything with the student athletes and NIL opportunities, because there's just a new brand that's coming into town?
Not necessarily one-to-one, I would say, but I know there's excitement about our transition into the Pac-12, from facilities to the competition, to just how iconic the Pac-12 brand is as a name. Most people know that brand nationwide, and for us to insert ourselves into that conference and have an opportunity to build what is going to be the new version of it, I think is really exciting. And then I think that excitement is just going to trickle down into our fan base as we, and we're bringing some rivalries with us, right? Like the school up north, as we call it, are coming into the conference. A lot of our Mountain West peers are coming into the conference, so there'll still be some familiarity on, one side. And then on the basketball side, you have Gonzaga coming into the conference and things like that, where our fans are going to love the opportunity to compete against a program like that annually. So yeah, I think overall, just the excitement and the brand notoriety of being associated with the Pac-12, along with being able to recruit to the Pac-12 and that type of thing, and then the businesses and the NIL opportunities, the donor investment, all that stuff. In my opinion, I can kind of see the tailwinds of what that looks like, just in our initial conversations of announcing it. So
Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity. Just it's everything's so new. When you were with the on the professional side, what did you take from them that you felt was a gap with college athletics that you immediately filled with, whether it's programming or resources or initiatives? Like, was there anything that the pro level does so well that you're like, oh, that has to be in college athletics?
yeah, I think it's really just, the pro model is set up to make money, right? Make money for all their stakeholders, whether it be the owners, whether it be the league, whether it be the players association, whether it be the players themselves. So everything they do, that's their North Star in theory, right? And then everything else trickles down from there. Whereas in college athletics, we kind of played this, throw a rock, hide your hand type of thing, where we say, the student athlete experience and education and student athlete, but then, our behaviors sometimes are counter to that. So
Right.
I think what I've seen, the biggest gap or the biggest opportunity, or the schools that are taking advantage of it, and fortunately I'm fortunate to be at a place that we have a very progressive mentality, is just that we're going to lean into the monetization of this experience, right? And we're not going to shy away from the fact that, yes, you can be a student and an athlete and there can be money involved, or, we as a institution can maximize our financial gain in partnership with the student athletes, right? So it doesn't have to be one person wins or one side wins and the other loses, right? It can be a thing where rising tide lifts all ships. So that's kind of what I see the gap and see the opportunity, is that we holistically, the administration, the school itself across campus, the student athletes, the alumni, we all get to share in this thing together, and we don't have to act as if we're misaligned, because we all have common goals, and we don't have to sacrifice one for the other. So
It's so interesting, back in the day, I mean, I'm dating myself and ourselves, right? Like it was always sport versus sport, and it was like what resources do they get versus and
right.
whatnot. And now it seems like, what athletic department is investing into all student athletes and all coaches versus the others, athletic department. Where are still some misconceptions about NIL resourcing, NIL education? Like what aren't administrators getting with it, but also like where are the future gaps?
Yeah, so I think one of the misconceptions just at large might be that it's only the football players and the basketball players that are benefiting, right? And I think we, are fortunate to have a number of programs, not named basketball and football, that are sharing revenue with their student athletes and providing, bridge income for those student athletes in terms of their supplementing scholarships or different things like that. So I think the opportunity for kind of tying back into that previous question of each of the sports being able to kind of create some autonomy and create some ownership in how they support their student athletes and how they engage their donors, how they engage their alumni, how they lead their sport. Whereas maybe traditionally all those things were just subsidized, right? And there wasn't a ton of autonomy. It was very cookie cutter. You get this, you make this work. Whether that be scholarships or resources, it was very boxed in. Whereas at least at the G5, G6 level, now we're able to kind of get rid of those lines and get rid of those boxes and allow those coaches to see the future. And I think that's honestly where one of the biggest gaps are is, if your program had traditionally been, subsidized, or, you didn't think of a need to monetize it or think of monetizing it because you didn't even charge tickets or entry to competitions for your sport. I think shifting even coaches' mentalities that, in theory, they have an obligation as well to beat the streets and work hard and cultivate those former student athletes in their sport that are now successful, who might want to pour back into the next generation. And pouring back doesn't always have to even mean rev share and NIL. It can mean an internship opportunity. It can mean career mentoring. Once again, tying into that life skills portion. So I think we're just in a new era where before everyone just looked forward. They were just like, these are my marching orders. This is my calendar. This is what I do. Rinse, repeat. Whereas now everyone's looking forward, and they should take a step back and look back into their alumni base, into how they've operated, and see like, were they overlooking, opportunities that are staring right at them in their face to try and, once again, make a positive impact on that student athlete experience. But, I think overall, the future is for those who are ambitious enough to go after it, whether that be a coach or administrator. And I think we're doing a really great job here at San Diego State of just thinking ahead and looking around corners as best we can. And we don't have those restrictions that the P4 schools have, where they're at the the maximum threshold according to the house settlement, and they have to find all these backdoor arrangements to try and circumvent it. But in theory, they're also the ones that accepted the settlement and aren't happy with the restrictions. So it's, once again, it's a crazy world we're living in, but that's what gets me up every morning to go to work. Is it's exciting at the same time. So
yeah, I love that. And there's an internal space of NIL, what we're doing with student athletes on campus.
Yep.
There's an external space for NIL with the connection to the community and businesses and whatnot. And 26 years ago, I was a student at the school out west. I don't know what you call USD, but that was our school. And it just seemed like, of the three major schools in San Diego, SDSU and kind of Montezuma and that they had that. USD was trying to get to the beach, and all that. But now I'm seeing signage. I just moved back to San Diego after those 26 years of being away, and there is SDSU footprint all over.
Yeah.
And so how, with your internal, hand, how much are you working with the external side, in terms of the outreach, the communication, some of the community involvement, like where's the connection to get those dollars to campus?
Yeah, I think, man, people take a lot of pride. I'm not from here. I'm originally from Virginia. So I've only been in San Diego for, this will be going on 3 years. And, just the statistics of 1 in 7 degree holding adults in San Diego went to San Diego State, right? Or the 500,000 living alum. And you compound that with the recent success in the past, maybe 15 years of athletics, and whether it be the football teams or, our swim and dive, softball, and obviously basketball making it to the pinnacle of the national championship and Final Four a couple of years ago. It's not hard to necessarily get support for SDSU in this market. I think the biggest thing is just making sure people are informed properly so that they aren't listening to the headlines and the clickbait and the misinformation, and that they actually understand how all of this works. So I think that's what we spend the most time on, is trying to make sure our communication to our fans and our donors and all of our stakeholders across San Diego, our corporate sponsors, they understand what this all means, and whether that means they want to make now with the new rules, they can make a donation to our development office and get the same, kind of tax deductible benefits that they would if they had donated to scholarships and et cetera in the past. But now that money can help a coach or a sport keep their team competitive in this current landscape and do some things that way. Or if they want to, amplify their business or what have you through true endorsement and influencer marketing with student athletes at San Diego State, they can take that track as well. And I think I always call it a mousetrap. Like we're trying to, my department isn't huge, so we're really just trying to lean on awareness and great communication and clear communication and meeting our fans where they are. So whether that means in the arena, whether that means in a newsletter, whether that means at an event, we're always engaging and having conversations about NIL to the point where people don't feel it's taboo. They don't feel like it's out of their league, and they can choose which track they want to go along with those traditional tracks like scholarships and capital projects and all that type of stuff. So yeah, it's a new day and age, and it's been really fun building out what all that means, because that's my nature as a former athlete, man. I want to get my hands dirty and look back and be able to say, I had a little bit of a role in building something, and it's been great here so far. So
yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Depend on how connected they are with you, with LinkedIn and whatnot. But like you've had, I'd say 3 or 4 wins in the last 6 months of you just, building this thing out. So maybe talk a little bit about, the 2, 3, 4 initiatives that you're hanging your hat on, because, and this is just me, my observation and opinion, but like, I just think it's so forward thinking what you're doing. So if you can talk a little bit about,
Yeah.
those things that are wins.
Yeah. And I like to say, I think it's funny because I was on a call with the technology partner we have yesterday, and he was saying how a lot of these schools, you've heard the talking points lately, are like all the schools are talking about true NIL as a way to supplement the rev share and the pay for play type of income that students are earning that was traditionally through collectives. And I was laughing because I'm like, that's been something I've taken a liking to and a passion to the moment I stepped into the role, right? Like it wasn't one or the other. Whereas I think a lot of these folks were focused strictly on fundraising and donor funding and collectives. We were focused on that, but we were also focused on connecting with true partners and people who wanted to provide our student athletes platforms to endorse their brands and things. So recently we've had a student athlete, Xavier Hamlet. He's huge into his community service and giving back to the community. He was able to partner with Segway, which is a huge company. Obviously, they were able to donate some scooters to a local kind of school in San Diego, in downtown San Diego. But then he was also able to get paid and do an endorsement deal. So it was one of those things that checked a lot of boxes that we were really proud of. Our star quarterback and defensive preseason defensive player of the year, Trey White and Jaden Denegal, were able to do a partnership with JLab, who's based up in Carlsbad, and they're a national brand. They do brand deals with Ohio State and Indiana and all these schools, Duke, all across the country. But they're in our backyard, and they've been a partner of ours for well over 3 years since I've gotten here, and the partnership has only gotten better and increased. And they love the accessibility to not just the student athletes, but to people like me who make their lives easier by removing obstacles and getting things approved on the ground here quickly. Because as you know, these deals happen fast, and brands don't want to be bogged down by bureaucratic paperwork and checks and balances. They want to move quickly like they can in the pro space. So JLab is another longtime partner of ours. And then from there, I'd say like OG's Pizza is another one. We take pride in doing traditional NIL activities and endorsements. Our merchandise students are able to sell their jerseys and make money that way. So we really lean in here in that space. And I think, like I said, we never thought we had to choose one or the other. We do a great job of funding. At one point it was our collective, and now it's our student athlete recruiting and retention fund that's internal, and we can do both. So it's just been funny to watch everybody kind of try and pivot to the marketing agencies and all these sports partnerships, and it's like, what were you guys doing for 3 years? You just now figured out you could help these student athletes build their brand. So I'm just proud to be a leader in the space and thinking forward thinking like we are.
Yeah, and obviously, I don't think you're shy about sharing knowledge. I don't think you're keeping it to yourself. But like, if there's a playbook out there that you have the first 2 to 3 action items, what would it be for schools or for athletic departments or people that are in your role?
Yeah, I think for one is that get someone in a role that's dedicated and focused on this type of work. I think our leadership was very forward thinking when I was the second person in my role initially. There was a person in 2021 that had a short stint in the role, and then I came in after that person. But we were, as soon as NIL passed, our administration said we needed a person for that, dedicated to that, which was very forward thinking. So I would say make sure you have a dedicated staff member that all they do is focus on NIL, and it could be NIL. Like early on for me, it was NIL and compliance, right? So I was, making sure we were following the rules around NIL, but then also educating our students and informing our students and things like that. I would say make sure you have staff and be willing to potentially invest in growing that staff, because the ratio of student athlete to staff member is important. in that student athlete experience piece. The second part I would say is like the foundational things. I had a call with the school recently, and I was just running them through kind of what you talked about, a playbook. And it's really those foundational touch points with the donors, right? Are you communicating NIL in the arena? Do they know who the point of contact for NIL is internally? So do the people in licensing across campus or in facilities know who to call if they have an NIL question? I think that ties back into the first part. But yeah, how are you showing up in arena? How are you showing up on newsletters? How are you showing up in all the communication you're sending out to your donors that might not traditionally have been NIL conversations? How are you weaving in NIL so you make everyone comfortable? And then from there, I think it's really just you have to have forward-thinking leadership. You have to have leadership at the top who believes this is important and doesn't try and put their head in the sand and hope it goes away, but understands that this is the new age. At one point, it was facilities. It was an arms race for facilities, right? And people were trying to build, right? And I think this is just the new NIL, just happened to be the new thing, and there'll be something that comes after NIL, and we don't know what that is yet necessarily, but you have to have really great leadership. So those are probably the three things I would say is, get staff, do those foundational touch points, and then hopefully you have someone at the top of at the tip of the spear, kind of leading and not trying to avoid. I was listening to something today that the challenge is the way, right? Like that's the way, is you can't avoid it. You can't stop, turn around, right? Like you have to go through it. So yeah, that's my advice to anyone out there.
I think that's huge. And so, how do you align your role, your responsibilities, your vision with the other entities that are within the athletic department? Because I'm sure, like, marketing or the content is important, right, for those student athletes, and then you got your coaches that you're probably saying, hey, we gotta do this and that. So how do you align it all?
Yeah, I think fortunately we've invested in additional staff. So I now have some support. I have an NIL coordinator. That was kind of my former role. I was able to backfill that role. And then we also have one of our deputy ADs who is at the deputy executive level, kind of championing NIL and handling some of those more nitty gritty things like contracts and dealing with general counsel and that type of stuff. So I would say at all three levels, we have alignment in terms of an NIL department, you could say, right? And then the three of us kind of divide and conquer, and it's fortunate because I laid a great foundation for my coordinator. So she's coming in and she's not having to build it from scratch, and she's not having to try and find out who does what and where things are. She's able to come in and kind of hit the ground running and just put her touch on the things that we're doing. So shout out to Abby for her support. And then I kind of manage a lot of the, I'd say, like I said, strategy day to day, like high level thinking ahead, right? Bringing potential potholes to the coaches or to our deputy staff on, hey, this is where I see things going. This is what we need to be worried about. Are we planning a calendar? Kind of those infrastructural, operational things is kind of what I spend my time on more. And Abby focuses more on our student athletes and a lot of the back end stuff. And then our deputy focus is at the executive level, making sure we maintain the space in the room, whatever room we're in, about NIL. So I think overall, over the last, let's call it 4 years since NIL started, our staff as a whole in our department, whether it be the marketing, the communications department, they've done a great job. Facilities, licensing, corporate partnerships, they've all done a great job of acknowledging that NIL is here to stay, acknowledging that it impacts all of our jobs because it impacts our ability to have competitive teams and recruit and retain student athletes. So I think that's something that's evolved over time. Is if you would have talked to me 3 years ago and asked me what my frustrations were or what my challenges were, alignment would have probably been at the top of that list, right? But fast forward through a lot of elbow grease and a lot of coaxing and just acknowledgement that this thing isn't going away. It's only going to get better or worse depending on how you look at it. Our staff and the whole department has kind of gotten behind it. And I think that goes back to having someone in that role that they know they can count on and know they can reach out to. So I think we're in a really great spot, man. I've had some peers who are at P4 institutions that, the bureaucracy and the red tape and the chain of command and all those types of things, everybody wanting to be in a new era where there's new problems. It's easy to have people gravitate to wanting to be the person to like fix it and solve it, right? But like I think sometimes that can be a negative experience because it's about ego instead of about solutions. And we're here at San Diego State, we're really just about solutions. I don't care who gets the credit. I don't care who had the idea. I don't care whose suggestion it was. It's really about, are we removing barriers and helping our coaches and our student athletes? And if we're doing those two things, then we're winning. And I haven't, thankfully, knock on wood, we haven't seen a drop off in our competitiveness in our league across any of our sports in this era. And I really think that's a testament to everything I just described.
Yeah. And I we're in a Navy town, right? So it's like rev share or the major fundraising, I feel, is those aircraft carriers that just have to stay steady. But NIL seems like, you're the little battleships. You guys got to, make the adjustments. If you had the wand and you had to change whether it's a state law on NIL or NCAA rule on NIL, what would you either eliminate, or what would need to happen for it to really, get to where you would want NIL to be for these student athletes?
Yeah, one of the things I would say is the 5-for-5 rule that everyone's kind of considering right now. 5 years to play 5, competitive years of your sport. I think that would, eliminating essentially the red shirt, I think that would be helpful because the red shirt is kind of used as a bargaining chip in some cases, which I think, if we can eliminate that, the potential of that, I think that would be awesome. I also think some type of agent registry or standardization around who can negotiate and represent student athletes. I think that as we've seen the proliferation of the money that's come into the space, you've also seen, any and everybody feel like they deserve a piece of the student athletes' earnings. So I would love to get some standardization around that. And then the last piece I would say is just probably two things: the contracts, standardizing contracts and what types of things can be in contracts or can't be in contracts across the country. And then potentially eliminating the cap, right? Like truly going to this free market approach that if someone wants to invest $40 million into a particular sport or into their athletic program, like, have at it, man. Like if that makes you feel great, do it. But I think what you'll see, and I won't name the schools, is you'll still see parity. You'll still see people make those types of investments and have awful seasons, right? And not perform well. And I think that type of stuff will self-regulate the market, right? Like people aren't going to want to continue to make that type of investment and not win or not have the desired outcomes that those investments are attached to. So, there was no cap on facility projects except for maybe Title IX, right? You couldn't just build all men's facilities, but if you wanted to spend on a locker room or what have you, you could spend it, and no one was telling you had to stay within a certain budget necessarily. So I think it's the same thing on NIL. I think we're driving ourselves crazy trying to over police some of the things that the free market would take care of on its own. Like we're trying to overcorrect in some senses where I think you just need time to let the market correct itself and don't try and manipulate it through human error, because that's how we got into this problem to begin with, is people kind of overcorrecting and over policing and creating too many policies. So I kind of believe in a free market on that sense, but still with some standardized kind of checks and balances around agents and contracts, and like I said, the 5-for-5 rule. So,
well, the free market tends to uncover laziness, right? Those
yeah.
whether it's coaches or ads or just
Yeah,
people not doing
it
the
creates
job.
accountability.
That's right.
Yeah, so people are gonna have to be accountable to the results, and which is once again, when you're talking about the adults, I think that's a good thing. And to your point, right? Like, it's usually not the student athlete who's being lazy necessarily. It's probably usually someone who's collecting years of tenure or pension or whatever it is, kind of just coaxing and coasting. So yeah, I think just it creates urgency and accountability, and I think that's a great thing, especially for the adults in the room, because it is easy for the adults to kind of set out to pasture a little bit and milk it, whereas the student athletes are so young and ambitious that they're usually just at the beginning phases of their resource gathering, I'll call it, right? So like they're trying to get every piece of the pie that they can get during this limited window that they can get it. Whereas you have maybe some of the adults in the room that are lifers. It's just like politics, right? Like, you have people who have been milking certain seats or different things forever, and it's probably not good for their constituents. So I think it's the same thing in college athletics, is sometimes that purge and natural selection solves itself, and you don't want to see anyone lose their jobs or anything. I'm not saying that, but at the same time, you have to be fiscally responsible and be able to account for why you made certain investments, and have some processes instead of just throwing money at things and thinking it'll solve your problem. So yeah.
No, that's good. And I think the free market always does that, right? That's why businesses thrive, and those that don't, they fail.
Yeah.
What's next for NIL? Like, what is something that, you foresee that we might not be thinking about?
Yeah. I mean, I think whether we want to acknowledge it or not, I feel like there's going to be some type of government intervention, whether it's the SCORE Act, the SAFE Act, to be determined. But I think there's going to be some type of government intervention to protect the sanctity of what has been the NCAA college athletics, the NCAA to Olympic pipeline, et cetera, Title IX, all those types of things. I think that's on the horizon. And then I personally think, I'm bearish on the current, what do I call it? I guess market value of what student athletes are being compensated. I think it's gotten inflated, and think it's potentially a bubble there where that's not sustainable. You can't continue to pay at that rate year over year across the country, and someone has to finish bottom half of the league, right? Like, you're gonna have some schools and some people that are very turned off by that, and are gonna try and say, hey, I read the book Moneyball, right? And at some point, the Oakland A's decided they didn't want to be the Yankees anymore. They had been the version of the Yankees during their World Series era, when they were overpaying certain players, and Ricky Henderson and different players like that. They were maxing out their budget, but then they got new ownership, and they said, hey, we're a small market. We don't want to be. We'll let the Yankees be the Yankees. We'll be the A's. And I think you'll see that happen in college athletics. So I think Title IX, I think government intervention, and then I think just a cooling off is what I would call it, of compensation, that had been driven by agents and desperation and fear of missing out, and a lot of misinformation, because if you don't know, if there's no, in the NFL, every team is spending the same amount, or in the NBA, there's these tax penalties for people who go over these thresholds. In college athletics, all you're hearing is these backdoor, numbers of what you think. There's no affirming of how much people are spending. So I think that creates a lack of transparency, creates fear, and fear creates poor decision making and irrational behavior and things like that. So I think that's what we've seen over the last 4 years or so, is you've seen the numbers, the investment into, let's just say, football, for example, in terms of roster spends has almost probably, 10x maybe, over the last 4 years. And I don't know a market where you've seen something like tick up
Right.
that quickly, and nothing's really changed about the quality of student athlete or performer or player or coach or et cetera, right? Like that's still mostly the same. So the only thing that's changed is, like I said, a lack of transparency around what everyone's paying and what I need to pay to be competitive. And, you have players and agents kind of pitting people against each other. And then the one thing I'll just end on there too is just the inclusion of the academic space, right? Like the impact that student athlete movement has on both the student athletes, because they lose credits or credits don't transfer when they go different places, is impactful. And I think that's not a good experience. But then also the staff, like a lot of people in the public eye don't see the admission staff and the academic staff and all the work that they put in to help these student athletes stay eligible, pass classes, coordinate their degrees, get them into school, all to potentially have them leave school again. It's kind of disheartening for the people
Mm-hmm.
who are in those departments and pouring into those student athletes every day, to not necessarily have those student athletes around, and it becomes transactional. And I don't think that's a good thing for either side. So I just wanted to, implant that too, is that there's some collateral damage around all this student athlete movement via education, which should be our, North Star in higher ed. But that could be a whole podcast in itself. So.
Right. Well, Brenden, the last two, before I ask the last two questions, I just want to acknowledge the fact that I think you're living proof that, NIL is important when it's invested in, but also how forward thinking you are with not only the knowledge sharing, but also the programming that you're doing with other schools, like the San Diego schools that you brought together that really had a conversation about where NIL is and the importance of the investment. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. But what do you love about your job?
Man, I was telling Abby, our NIL coordinator, the other day, is like not leaving stressed from work. Like it's rare that I come into work or leave work like stressed or worried or concerned, or feeling like, oh my gosh, if this doesn't happen, my job's on the line, or this or that. And I've worked in some careers where you really are worried and stressed over different things. Or I can imagine being a coach, right? Like that stress of wins and losses. Being on the administrative side, I don't have that stress, and I really enjoy the people I get to work with, the problems we get to solve every day. And it doesn't feel like work. It's really a pleasure to come into the office every day. So I would say, like, my quality of life in this role is what I enjoy the most.
Yeah, that's good. So we like to end with this fill in the blank. So the future of college athletics is blank because blank.
Man, I'd say the future of college athletics is bright because it's going to fix itself, in my opinion. I think we just need to give it time. I think we're lacking patience right now, and everyone thinks everything is a 4 a.m. fire and everything needs to be solved right now. And it's like, just let it solve itself. It's almost like a wound, right? When you have a wound, the more you pick at it, the more you scratch at it, the wound doesn't heal. The more you leave it alone, you leave it covered, you put some ointment on it, whatever, and let it take its course, it'll fix itself. So I think or bone, right? Like, I think that's kind of what we need to do, is give this new era time to settle and solve itself. And I think the smart people at the tables will eventually realize, they'll have an epiphany one day because maybe they're under pressure around their job or the accountability to those resources that they allocated. They'll have an epiphany and say, this probably isn't the smartest thing to do. There's probably a better way to think about this, and they'll start thinking about it differently. And I think that's what you're honestly seeing. Is funny. I think at the G5, G6 level, you're probably getting a more pure picture of what the future of college athletics could look like, because we're nowhere near the cap, right? So we're not trying to circumvent rules, and we're not trying to backdoor this to make this happen. We're just really operating in almost a purest form of what the future of college athletics could look like. Whereas maybe at the Power 4 level, they're in a little more of a dog eat dog scarcity type of mentality. And I think, that's kind of where the bubble is, and that's where the biggest wound is. But yeah, I would say if the Power 4 could learn a little bit from the group of 5 and group of 6 who are beating the Power 4 in some cases, even in one-to-one competitions, is to just, let this thing, take care of itself, and don't feel like you need to keep up with the Joneses. Like, we know we're not spending at the level of, let's say, Ohio State in football, but like, we still feel like we're pursuing championships. We're graduating student athletes. Our students are having a great student athlete experience. We live in one of the best cities in America. Our fans are engaged. Our donors are engaged. Like, things are good, right? So yeah, I that's what I would say. The future is bright if we leave it alone, and it will fix itself. So.
Yeah. Well, Brenden, thank you very much for joining us. That's Brenden Hill from SDSU. Obviously, you can find him on LinkedIn. For those of you who are listening and watching, please subscribe and follow. Every Tuesday is another episode, and we will see you next time.